A man in a khaki jacket kneels at the foot of a black cliff in Sudan. In his notebook, he has drawn 7 fragments of a stone head. They lie in the sand at his feet. One of them will disappear for 78 years. This is the story of a kingdom buried twice. An African king rides north into Egypt with 8 horses at his side. He is coming to make himself Pharaoh. The year is 727 before the Common Era, and he will succeed. 91 years of Nubian rule will follow. He will call himself the son of Amun. The Bible will remember his dynasty. The Egyptians will spend the next century trying to erase him from every wall. 6 centuries later, a Nubian queen carries a bronze head wrapped in red cloth into the courtyard of a temple in the city of Meroe. She has one eye. She has just sacked a Roman fortress on the border of Egypt. The head belongs to the Emperor Augustus. She buries it face down under the steps of the Victory Temple and walks up over it every morning for the rest of her reign. 19 centuries later, in the basement of a museum in Boston, a curator opens a wooden box marked Stray Stone Fragments, 1916. He lifts out a piece of black granite the size of his palm. He walks 3 meters to a headless statue standing on wooden supports and holds the fragment up to the face. It fits. The face of an African king is whole for the first time in 2,586 years. The name of the kingdom is Kush. It lived on the Nile for 3,000 years. It outlasted Egypt. It fought Rome and won. It built more than 200 pyramids in the Sudanese desert, more than twice the number in Egypt. It wrote its own language, in an alphabet of its own invention, for 500 years, and then no one could read it, and the alphabet went silent. Then it was buried under sand for 1,500 years, and then it was buried a second time by the men who dug it up. This video is about how a kingdom disappears twice. It is about who carried it back. It is about a man in a khaki jacket in 1916 who saw everything and understood almost nothing. It is about the man who came 78 years later into a basement in Boston and finished the sentence. A man stands on the low deck of a wooden trading boat, pushing a long pole against the shallow bottom of the Nile. It is mid-morning. The fiber rope wrapped around the pole cuts thin against a callus on his palm. He does not feel it anymore. The river here runs between banks of pink sand. The sun is climbing behind cliffs of ochre sandstone on his right. On his left, a single line of date palms marks the edge of the cultivated ground. 20 paces beyond the palms, the desert begins. He is going downstream. The boat is loaded with ebony logs, cut in the forests of the south, and stacked in the middle of the deck under coarse cloth. The smell of fresh-cut ebony is heavy and dry in the air. There are elephant tusks under the ebony. There is a leather sack of gold dust at his feet. He does not know the name of the country he lives in. He knows the name of his city, Kerma. He knows that a day upstream there is a fortress belonging to the Egyptians, and that the men in it will trade for what he is carrying. He knows the price of ebony this year. He knows that his father did this trip, and his father before him. The kingdom his city belongs to has already lasted 700 years. In another 200, it will be destroyed. In another 2,000, its name will be forgotten in every language except the one he is speaking now. The Nile, in this stretch, is not the Nile of the Egyptians. Between the first and the sixth cataract, 6 stretches of white water where the river cuts through granite ridges. The valley narrows to a green strip a few kilometers wide, held between 2 deserts. Everything grows on that strip. Everything that moves, moves along it. The great trade of Africa runs on the water beneath his pole, gold from the eastern desert, ebony and ivory from the south, incense from the Red Sea coast, copper going the other way. He is not thinking of himself as the first thread of a story 3,000 years long. He is thinking about the current and how many more hours to the fortress. A mason kneels on a wooden scaffold 9 meters above the ground, laying a course of mud brick in the southeast corner of a rising tower. It is early afternoon in Kerma, and the sun is directly overhead. The temperature at the top of the scaffold is above 40 degrees. Each brick weighs about 5 kilograms. He lifts them one at a time from a boy standing below him, sets them in a bed of wet clay mortar, and taps them level with the flat of his palm. The tower is called today the Western Defufa. In his language, it has no name. It is 50 meters long, 25 wide, and it will rise to 18 meters when it is done. It will be the largest mud brick structure in the ancient world outside Mesopotamia, and the second largest ancient building in Africa after the pyramids at Giza. The pyramids at Giza are already 1,000 years old. Below him, the city runs for 25 hectares along the east bank of the Nile. He can see the royal precinct. He can see the Western Cemetery, where the kings of Kerma are buried in circular tumuli. He can see the workshops that turn out the black-topped ceramics traded as far north as the Delta and as far south as the Fifth Cataract. On the horizon, the caravan track into the eastern desert, where his brother works the gold mines that feed the treasury of the kingdom. The kingdom has a king. It has an elite. It has its own architecture, its own funerary religion, its own writing system, its own foreign policy. It is at war off and on with the Egyptians to the north. 36 centuries later, an American archaeologist named George Reisner will excavate this scaffold, this tower, and this city. He will map it carefully. He will photograph it meticulously. And in his final report, published in 1923, he will conclude that Kerma was not the capital of a Nubian kingdom at all, that it had been founded and ruled by a caste of Egyptian governors, white men from the north, whose graves he was mistaking for the graves of local kings. He will get almost everything about the site right, except what it was. A captain stands on the north wall of the fortress at Buhen, watching the sun set over the Second Cataract of the Nile. It is late afternoon. The stone of the parapet under his palm is still warm from the day. A dry wind off the northwest is beginning to move fine grit across his face. Below him, in the fortress courtyard, hammers are working. His men are dismantling the north gate. They will not close it again. He is the third in his family to serve here. His grandfather was Egyptian from Thebes. His grandmother was Nubian from a village a day upstream. He speaks both languages. He has spent the last 30 years of his life inside these walls, wearing a uniform of a country he has never seen. Buhen has been a fortress for 600 years. It was built by the Pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom to hold the southern border and rebuilt by Thutmose, the third of the New Kingdom. Egypt held Nubia for 5 centuries. The Egyptians called their territory here Kush. They installed a viceroy called the King's Son of Kush. They mined the gold that paid for the temples at Karnak. A generation ago, there were 40,000 Egyptian soldiers in Nubia. This year, there are fewer than 100, and the orders have come to bring them all home. The new kingdom is collapsing. In the delta, 1,000 kilometers to the north, the 20th dynasty has broken apart. The priests of Amun at Thebes have taken over the south. The pharaoh in the north rules only a corner of the delta, and no one has money to garrison a fortress at the Second Cataract of a foreign river. The captain does not know what will happen next in Egypt. He knows what will happen here. The Nubian kings will come back. The Egyptian gods left behind at Napata will not be discarded. They will be adopted, reworked, made local. In 300 years, a Nubian king will ride north out of Napata with an army of chariots, and he will make himself Pharaoh of Egypt. The captain does not know any of this. He watches the sun go down. A king stands outside his tent in the last hour before dawn, watching the eastern horizon. The cold is worse than he expected. He has spent his life in Napata, 1,500 kilometers upriver, where December nights are dry and salt. Here in the north of Egypt, the delta damp cuts through the wool cloak on his shoulders and settles in his ribs. Behind him, under a heavy canvas awning, 8 horses stand tied in a row. He hears one of them shift its weight. He smells the manure warming under the straw. His name is Pie. He is the king of Kush. He has been on this campaign for 8 months. He is not here for revenge. He is not here for tribute. He is here because a Libyan chieftain in the delta named Tefnacht has been trying to unify Middle Egypt under Libyan rule, and the Egyptian priests of Amun, who consider Pie their legitimate patron, sent a request to Napata for intervention. Pie has come north with an army. He has taken a string of Middle Egyptian cities on the way. He is about to receive the surrender of the Prince of Hermopolis. At the far edge of the camp, trumpets begin. The Egyptian envoys are arriving. Prince Nimlot of Hermopolis, defeated and starving, has emptied his stables and his treasury to send everything he owns to Pie: horses, gold, lapis lazuli, malachite, copper. He is coming himself, on foot, with his wife, walking beside him. On a stele that Pie will erect in his capital when this campaign is over, Nimlot's greeting will be recorded. Peace be with you, Horus, mighty of arms, bull who conquers bulls. Pie is beginning 91 years of Nubian rule over Egypt. He is also going home. This is the strangest fact about Pie. He conquers Egypt and does not stay. When Hermopolis surrenders, when Memphis falls, when the Delta chieftains bring their tribute, Pie installs vassals, restores the temples he considers neglected, boards his boat, and sails 1,000 kilometers upstream, back to Napata, back to the shadow of Jebel Barkal. He will govern Egypt from Nubia. He will never see it again. A king stands between 2 limestone columns, 21 meters tall, still under construction, in the first courtyard of the Temple of Amun at Karnak. It is noon. The dust of freshly cut limestone hangs thick in the air. It settles on his linen shoulder cloth and on the copper of his short sword. All around him, the ringing of bronze chisels against stone continues in an unbroken rhythm. 60 craftsmen at once. He is 46 years old. His name is Taharqa. He is the Pharaoh of Egypt and the king of Kush. He wears the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. On the front of it, over his forehead, 3 cobras rise instead of 1. Only kings of the Nubian dynasty wear the triple uraeus. It is their mark of legitimacy on the throne of the 2 lands. The Egyptians have not seen a pharaoh this openly foreign in 1,000 years, and Taharqa is inspecting the largest temple expansion any pharaoh has commissioned since the reign of Ramesses II. The 25th dynasty is at its peak. Pie's nephews and grandsons are building on a scale that has not been seen in Egypt for centuries. Colonnades at Karnak, new sanctuaries at Medinet Habu, a temple at Kawa in the Sudan, whose foundation, stele, will still be legible in the 20th century. They are not building Nubian temples in Egyptian territory. They are restoring, deliberately, the styles of the Old and Middle Kingdoms, cultivating an image of continuity with the classical Egyptian past that the intervening centuries had lost. Their scribes recopy old religious texts. Their sculptors quote the smooth planes of 4th dynasty portraiture. They are more Egyptian on purpose than the Egyptians. Taharqa will face the Assyrians. He will lose Memphis to Esarhaddon and take it back. The second book of Kings will remember him, and when he dies, his body will be carried 1,000 kilometers upstream and buried under the largest pyramid ever raised in Nubia, at Nuri, near Jebel Barkal, on ground his descendants will hold for another 600 years. He does not know, and no one in the courtyard knows, that in 90 years an Egyptian pharaoh will send an army south to erase his face from every wall. Pause here. 2,000 years have passed. A city on the Nile called Kerma has been founded, grown into the largest urban center in Africa outside Egypt, and destroyed. A boy has climbed the scaffold of a mud brick tower that still stands. A captain has walked out of an Egyptian fortress and closed no gate behind him. A king named Paye has conquered Egypt and gone home to Napata. His nephew Taharqa has raised the largest colonnades at Karnak in a millennium. A statue of Aspelta has had its nose polished, its nose broken, and the fragments have gone under the sand. A scribe in Meroe has begun teaching a boy how to write in an alphabet the world outside will never learn to read. We are halfway. The kingdom is at its height. The pyramids are still being built. Rome is still a village in Italy. Alexander has not yet been born. What comes next is the second half. A one-eyed queen buries the head of a Roman emperor under a staircase. Iron furnaces burn for 500 years. The rains fail. A priest walks between the pyramids of Meroe on the last morning. The kingdom disappears. And then, for 1,500 years, it stays gone. Watch the man in the khaki jacket. We will meet him again. A sculptor sits cross-legged on the sandstone floor of a workshop at the foot of Jebel Barkal, polishing the nose of a black granite statue that lies face up beside him. It is early morning. The shadow of the mountain still covers the courtyard. The air is cold. The statue is 3 meters long, weighs about 4 tons, and represents the King Aspelta, who took the throne 6 years ago. In the sculptor's right hand, a rag wrapped around a lump of moistened abrasive powder. He draws it in short strokes across the bridge of the nose. The nose is the last thing he will finish today. The lips were polished yesterday. The eyes, inlaid with obsidian and calcite, were done last week. When the polishing is finished, the statue will be lifted upright and set at the entrance of the Temple of Amun, one of a row of 7 kings. Behind him, the sacred mountain rises 100 meters out of the plain. The kings of Kush have called this rock the throne of Amun for 400 years, and it is one of the reasons they consider themselves the legitimate rulers of Egypt. The sculptor does not know that in 2 years the Egyptians will come. In 592, before the Common Era, the pharaoh Psamtik II will send a punitive expedition south into Nubia. His army will march to Napata. His soldiers will enter this temple. They will find the 7 statues. They will decapitate each of them and break off the noses and the lips. The Egyptians have a word for this. It is the erasure of memory. The fragments will fall on the floor of this courtyard, and by evening they will be under a thin drift of sand. They will stay there for 2,508 years. In February of 1916, an American archaeologist will find the pit into which they were later buried. He will lift the body of the statue of Aspelta. He will collect the fragments. He will ship everything to Boston, and in the crate marked stray stone bits, a piece the size of a palm will travel to the basement of a museum, and no one will open the box. A scribe sits on a woven reed mat in a low-ceilinged room in the palace of Meroe, teaching a boy of 10 how to write. It is mid-morning. Between them, a stone ink pot of soot mixed with gum arabic. The smell is sweet and slightly sour, and the boy is used to it now. In the scribe's right hand, a reed pen sharpened to a fine point. On his knee, a strip of prepared parchment. On the boy's knee, a flat plate of sandstone with the first row of signs already scratched onto it in charcoal. The scribe is teaching the boy an alphabet. It has 23 signs, 15 consonants, 4 vowels, and 4 syllables. Each sign has been adapted over the last century from the cursive form of an Egyptian hieroglyph, but the sounds they represent are not Egyptian, and the language they encode is not Egyptian. The language is Meroitic. It is the language they are speaking now. It is not Egyptian. It is not Semitic. It is not any language that anyone north of the Second Cataract can read. The kingdom of Kush, in the 3rd century before the Common Era, has done something no other African kingdom south of Egypt has done. It has invented its own writing. For the next 500 years, this alphabet will be used everywhere. Royal stelae, funerary inscriptions, offering tables, graffiti on temple walls, accounts, letters, hymns to gods that the North has never heard of. Then, sometime after the 4th century of the Common Era, the kingdom will collapse. The last person who can read Meroitic will die. The alphabet will remain, carved and painted on hundreds of monuments in the Sudanese desert, but no one alive will know what it says. In 1911, a British Egyptologist named Francis Llewellyn Griffith will publish a paper working out how the signs sound. We will learn to pronounce the words. We will not learn what they mean. That will take another 90 years, and it is not finished yet. The scribe hands the boy a corner of parchment and a new pen. The boy writes his name. The word is Ato. It means water. The alphabet begins its 500-year run. A woman walks into the courtyard of the Temple of Amun at Meroe in the last hour of daylight. She is 50 years old, and she is missing one eye. In her arms, wrapped in a length of red cloth, is a bronze head about 46 centimeters tall. It weighs a little under 10 kilograms. The wrap is warm from her hands. She is not crowned. She is not accompanied by musicians. The escort is silent. Her name is Amanirenas. She is Kandake, Queen of Meroe. The Greeks will spell the title Candace, and later, readers of the Book of Acts will assume it is a personal name. It is not. It is the title of a line of Nubian sovereigns, women who rule Meroe in their own right, in a system that Roman geographers cannot decide whether to describe as a monarchy or a matriarchy. Amanirenas has just come back from the border. 6 years earlier, after Rome annexed Egypt following the death of Cleopatra, the Romans pushed south. In response, Amanirenas led an army north across the First Cataract and sacked the Roman garrison town of Syene. She pulled down the imperial statues of Augustus. She dragged the population back into Nubia. The head in her arms was cut from one of those statues. Strabo, who is writing in Rome about now, will describe her as a masculine sort of woman and blind in one eye. It is a Roman line. Take it with the parallax it deserves. She walks to the base of the staircase of the Victory Temple. A shallow pit has been opened under the first step. She kneels. She sets the bronze head face down in the pit. The eyes, inlaid with calcite, still intact, look into the ground. Masons pour sand over it. The stone of the staircase is put back. Every morning for the rest of her reign, and for every reign of every Kandake who comes after her, the queens of Meroe will walk up over the face of the Roman emperor. Amanirenas holds the border against Rome, negotiates a treaty on the island of Samos, and secures Kush's independence for 3 centuries. The head stays under the step for 1,934 years. A master metallurgist crouches at the mouth of a smelting furnace in the workshop quarter east of the city of Meroe. It is an hour before dawn. In front of him, a clay furnace the height of a standing man. Inside it, packed layers of iron ore and acacia charcoal are already glowing red. Two apprentices work leather bellows on either side of him, alternating breaths, and the temperature inside the furnace passes 1,200 degrees Celsius. The heat coming off the wall of the furnace at 2 paces is intolerable. He wears leather sleeves and a heavy leather apron, and he cannot stay in front of it for more than a minute at a time. Behind him, in the workshop yard, there are hills. They are hills of slag, black and glassy, left over from the last 30 years of continuous production. In another 5 centuries, there will be so much slag piled around Meroe that a British Egyptologist arriving in the early 20th century will look at the mounds and call the city the Birmingham of Africa. The industry is that big. Meroe is one of the great iron producers of the ancient world. Its iron goes east to the Red Sea port of Adulis, and from Adulis it goes across the Indian Ocean to the Malabar coast. It goes north to Roman Egypt. It goes south to what will one day be Ethiopia. Meroe is a hub, connected to Rome by the Nile, to India by the sea, to Central Africa by caravan. The kingdom now has aqueducts. It has bathhouses with Roman-inspired plumbing. It has a script it uses for administration, and no one outside Meroe can read the script. It has queens with treasuries so full of gold jewelry that when one of them, Amani Shaketo, is buried at the top of a pyramid a generation later, an Italian adventurer with a barrel of gunpowder will find enough gold in her tomb to retire on. This is the peak. The kingdom has held for 2,500 years. It has 3 centuries left. The metallurgist adjusts the bellows. The furnace glows a little brighter. Somewhere to the north, the first gray line of dawn shows over the desert. An old priest walks between the pyramids of the northern cemetery of Meroe in the last hour before dawn. He is 65 years old. He has served in the temple of Amun since he was a boy. He has buried 3 of the kings whose pyramids he is now walking past. There are 41 pyramids around him. They are smaller than the pyramids at Giza, steeper-sided, with sanctuary chapels built against their eastern faces. In this last hour of darkness, they are simple silhouettes against a sky beginning to turn gray. The wind that comes off the eastern desert is dry and cold. Sand is caught between his teeth, and he does not notice. He stopped noticing weeks ago. Under his robe, tied on a leather thong, there is a narrow strip of leather with 3 lines of Meroitic script cut into it. He does not remember what it says. He memorized the sounds as a boy. He never learned the meaning of most of the words in his own language's written form. The priesthood taught him to read the script aloud in liturgy, and left the meanings to the specialist scribes. There are no specialist scribes left. There have not been any for 2 generations. The script now sounds and does not signify. Behind him, the palace of the queens is being emptied. Not looted, emptied. Trunks are being packed. Chariots are being loaded. The royal family, what remains of it, has decided to move east into the highlands where the summer rain still comes. This morning, they left. The reasons the kingdom has stopped are not one thing. The Red Sea trade has moved to the Axumites in what will become Ethiopia. The ships that came to Adulis for Meroitic iron now come for Axumite ivory. The rains that fed the grassland south have shifted. The Sahara has moved 20 kilometers south in a lifetime. And around this year, a stele will be raised at Aksum in the name of the King Ezanyana, recording a military campaign against the peoples of the Middle Nile. The traditional reading is that as Zana destroyed Meroe. A recent reading holds that he came at Meroe's request to put down a rebellion. Either way, the capital stops functioning. The priest walks to the eastern chapel of the northernmost pyramid. He kneels. He removes the leather strip from around his neck and places it under a fallen offering stone. He does not know why. It feels like the correct thing to do. He stands. He walks back through the pyramids toward the caravan. The strip stays under the stone for 1,572 years until an American excavator sifts it out of a small collapsed tomb in the Western Cemetery in 1922, catalogs it as object of undetermined function, script illegible, and puts it in a drawer in Boston. In 2011, a French linguist will read it aloud. It is 3 lines of a royal hymn. He will translate what he can. The priest walks past the northernmost pyramid. The sun comes up on his left. A monk stands on a low scaffold inside a cathedral in the city of Pharaohs, painting the face of a bishop onto a damp brick wall. It is early morning, and the cathedral is dark except for the oil lamps set in the niches high above his head. In his left hand, a wooden palette with pigments ground from ochre, malachite, and lapis lazuli traded up from Egypt. In his right, a brush of fine goat hair. The wall in front of him has to stay wet while he works. The lime plaster fixes the pigment as it dries, and the smell of wet lime is heavy in the closed air of the church. The figure is a bishop. His skin is dark. He wears the vestments of a Byzantine deacon. His eyes are long and almond-shaped in the local style. Above his shoulder in Old Nubian, written in the Greek alphabet, is his name and his date. The year in the reckoning outside these walls is around 800 of the Common Era. Meroe has been gone for 450 years. The Meroitic alphabet has not been read for almost as long. What replaced the kingdom of Kush is 3 Christian kingdoms strung along the Nile: Nobadia in the north, Makuria in the center, Alodia in the south. They were converted in the 6th century by missionaries out of Constantinople and Alexandria. They will hold this stretch of the river as Christian states for another 700 years. The monk does not know that in 1160 years, the cathedral will be flooded. The Aswan High Dam will be closed. Lake Nasser will fill, and Pharaohs will disappear underwater. Before that happens, a Polish archaeologist named Kazimierz Michalowski will lead a rescue campaign for UNESCO, cutting the frescoes off the walls one at a time and shipping them to Warsaw and Khartoum. They will hang in 2 museums 12,000 kilometers apart, saved by the last analog archaeology before satellites. The monk finishes the bishop's left eye. He steps down from the scaffold. The wall behind him will still be legible in the year 2026. A merchant rides a camel across the Butana in the late afternoon of a day in 1650-something. He is a Muslim from the Funj Sultanate at Sennar, halfway through the 90-day trip north to Cairo. 4 other camels walk behind him, loaded with cured hides and gum arabic. The wind is coming off the northwest, lifting spirals of fine sand between the mounds ahead of him. He can smell the leather of his own saddlebags and the sweat of the animal under him. The mounds ahead of him are pyramids. There are 41 of them in a line on a rise about 3 kilometers to his west. Most of the tops are already worn or broken. A few still stand at their original height. Sand has climbed a third of the way up their sides. His people call the place Begarawiya, the pyramids. His grandfather passed here on the same route. So did his grandfather's grandfather. He knows they were built by kings. He does not know which kings. The name Meroe is not remembered by anyone in the Fun Sultanate. The Meroitic language has not been read for 1,300 years. The Egyptians to the north do not remember either. What has been forgotten is not the pyramids. The pyramids are simply there, part of the geography of the eastern Butana, marked on the mental maps of every caravan driver between Dongola and Sennar. What has been forgotten is who built them, when, and why. The forgetting has not happened here. It has happened in Paris. It has happened in London. It has happened in Rome. Between the fall of Rome and the arrival of Napoleon in Egypt, Europe has no cartography of the Sudan. When a Scottish explorer named James Bruce comes downriver from Ethiopia in 1772 and describes the pyramids of Meroe to a London audience, they will not believe him. When a French geologist named Frédéric Cailliaud arrives in 1820 and publishes drawings of them, the Paris academies will consider his volumes a romance. The merchant does not know any of this. He passes the pyramids. He sees them because they are there. He does not see them because he cannot help but see them. He rides on toward Cairo. A man in a khaki jacket sets a folding table down on the sand at the foot of the western face of Jebel Barkal. It is nearly sunset. Behind him, the cliff rises 100 meters straight up, the color of old iron in this light, and the stone is still warm from the day. In front of him, on the table, 5 open field notebooks, a hand-drawn plan of the temple complex, and a small brass compass. His hair is thinning. He is 48 years old. His name is George Andrew Reisner, and he has just identified the 2 buried pits that contain the 7 statues of the Kushite kings that Psamtik II decapitated in 592 before the Common Era. Reisner has been walking backward through the story of this kingdom for 3 years, and will walk forward through it for another 16. But before Reisner, the story arrives in Europe piece by piece. The Scottish traveler James Bruce, in 1772, is the first modern European to see Meroe. His London audience calls him a liar. The French geologist Frédéric Cailliaud, in the 1820s, draws the pyramids and gets Paris to believe. An Italian adventurer named Giuseppe Ferlini, in 1834, uses barrels of gunpowder to blow the tops off dozens of pyramids at Meroe. Looking for gold, he finds it in the tomb of the Queen Amanishakheto. He sells it to Berlin and to Munich. 40 pyramids stand truncated behind him when he leaves. And in December of 1910, an English archaeologist named John Garstang lifts the corner of a staircase in the temple courtyard at Meroe and finds a bronze head of the Emperor Augustus buried face down under the step. It has been in the ground for 1,934 years. 3 years later, Reisner arrives. He works Kerma from 1913 to 1916. He publishes Excavations at Kerma in 1923. In that book, he concludes that the largest ancient African city outside Egypt was in fact an Egyptian colony ruled by a caste of northern white governors. He never revises the conclusion. He works Jebel Barkal from 1916. He works Nuri from 1916 to 1919, mapping 80 royal pyramids. During the Nuri excavation, a wooden stair collapses in one of the burial chambers, and 5 of his Nubian workmen do not come out. Reisner abandons the flooded chambers and moves the expedition to El Karoo. He works Meroe from 1920 to 1923. The expedition catalogs more than 40,000 objects. In 1942, at 74, he dies at his desk at Giza, still writing. Nothing in the interpretation is corrected in his lifetime. The correction begins with a book. In 1977, an American archaeologist named William Adams publishes Nubia, Corridor to Africa, and dismantles the Risnerian reading kingdom by kingdom. It is the first post-colonial synthesis of the archaeology of the Middle Nile. 3 years later, a curator named Timothy Kendall walks into the Egyptian department of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, where all of Risner's Nubian material has been in storage for half a century, and begins to look at it. He will spend the next 14 years doing what Risner never did. He will open every box. A man stands in a basement storeroom in the Egyptian department of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, opening a wooden crate. It is mid-morning in the spring of 1994. The room is low-ceilinged and lit by a single high window on the west wall. A shaft of clear white light comes down across the wooden work table in front of him. There is a low hum from an industrial air conditioner behind the shelves. The museum has not yet opened for the day. He is 48 years old. He wears a gray cardigan and round glasses. His name is Timothy Kendall. He has been coming into this storeroom for 14 years. He has been through most of it. Today, he is at a crate marked in faded ink, Jebel Barkal, 1916, stray stone fragments, uncatalogued. Risner shipped it from the Sudan. Risner never opened it again. Nobody has. Kendall lifts out 6 pieces, one at a time, and sets them on the work table in a row. They are pieces of polished black granite, the size of small stones. He picks up the 7th. It is about 7 centimeters wide. It has a curve at the top. It weighs a little over half a kilogram. It is cold against his palm. He turns it over. He recognizes the shape. He does not put it down. He carries it across the room, 3 meters, to a colossal statue standing on wooden supports against the wall in preparation for a new gallery. The statue is black granite, 3 meters tall, headless from the mouth up. Its inscription names a king of Kush who took the throne in 598 before the Common Era, Aspelta. Kendall raises the fragment to the broken face of the statue. He holds it against the place where the nose should be. It fits. The line of the break aligns exactly. The polish of the granite matches. The angle of the bridge continues into the plane of the cheekbone. The face of the king of Kush is whole. For the first time since Psamtik II broke it at Jebel Barkal in 592 before the Common Era, 2,586 years ago. The light from the high window catches the black granite of Aspelta's cheek and the sleeve of Kendall's cardigan at the same angle. The air conditioner keeps humming. Kendall does not move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sets the fragment on the pedestal beside the statue, walks back to the work table, and picks up his notebook. He has 13 more crates. This is what the Kingdom of Kush was. It was a state on the Nile that began around 2500 before the Common Era and ended around 350 of the Common Era. It was 3 cities in succession: Kerma, Napata, Meroe. It built more than 200 pyramids in a stretch of desert north of Khartoum, more than twice as many as Egypt built. It conquered Egypt and held it for 91 years. It fought Rome and secured a border that held for 3 centuries. It invented its own writing. It smelted enough iron to give its capital a nickname in modern English. It survived, transformed into 3 Christian kingdoms that held the Middle Nile for another 700 years. And then, when those kingdoms fell too, its people remained on the river, remembered the pyramids by name, and let the specific history of the kings under them slip out of memory. Then the outside world began to arrive. And here is the odd thing. Kush was not lost. The pyramids were never covered so completely that the caravan drivers did not know they were there. The temples were never so buried that the priests of the mountain forgot the mountain. What was lost was the meaning of what remained. The forgetting was not the deserts, it was the world's, and when the world came back, Bruce in 1772, Cailleod in the 1820s, Ferlini and his gunpowder, Garstang and his staircase, Reisner and his 40,000 objects, the world came back with a framework that could see the size of the thing and could not see what the thing was. Reisner mapped the largest concentration of pyramids in Africa. He excavated the largest ancient African city outside Egypt. He recovered more Nubian material than anyone before him or after him. And he concluded from all of that it was a colony of the north. So the thread of Kush was carried in two motions. In the first motion, one man saw scale. In the second, a different man, 78 years later in the same museum, working from the same crates, saw sovereignty. The correction was not made by rejecting Reisner's work. It was made by opening the boxes he had left closed. Some of the thread has still not arrived. The Meroitic alphabet is still not fully read. A French linguist named Claude Rilly has been working since 2003 to fit its grammar into the wider family of Nilo-Saharan languages, and much of the corpus is now translatable in outline. But the hymns, the accounts, the private letters carved on offering tables in the desert of the Sudan, most of them still sound and do not signify. That thread will belong to whoever comes next. The thread that has arrived we can name. The face of a king who was hammered off a granite statue at the foot of a sacred mountain in the year 592 before the Common Era. The head of a Roman emperor buried under a staircase by a queen with one eye. A leather strip tucked under an offering stone by a priest on the morning his kingdom went east. All of them were held in the ground for a very long time. All of them came out. And in a basement in Boston, on a morning in the spring of 1994, a man in a gray cardigan held a piece of black granite up to a stone face that had been waiting for its nose since a Nubian sculptor set his abrasive powder down and went home. The line of the break aligned. The polish matched. The king had his face back. Every empire ends. The thread does not. There is a stele in Ethiopia, in the highland city of Aksum, cut in the 4th century of the Common Era in the language called Ge'ez. It records a military campaign against the peoples of the Middle Nile, waged by the king named Ezana. It is the earliest surviving inscription in an African language other than Egyptian. It is one of the reasons we know what happened in Meroe on the morning we walked with the priest through the pyramids, and it belongs to a kingdom that we have not yet fully talked about. Aksum outlasted Rome by a century. It converted to Christianity in the same generation as Constantine. It cast its own coinage in gold, silver, and bronze, while most of Europe was falling out of coinage entirely. It built stone monoliths taller than any Egyptian obelisk. It was one of the 4 great powers of the 3rd century world. A Persian writer of the time listed them: Rome, Persia, China, Aksum. Its stelae are still standing. Its language, unlike Meroitic, is still read. If you have not seen the earlier video on Aksum, it is linked below. The next civilization.